Okay, so we went on this massive detour into capitalism and socialism. Why? Because we want to talk about the market economy. Why do we want to talk about the market economy? Well, the institutions that were implemented set the stage for the market economy. The market economy is responsible for the innovation that drives the growth that we are talking about. I mean, all this class is about economic growth. This is about the history of economic growth. So in this time period, in the 1800s, the innovation is primarily coming from the market economy, from the market economy. The present 20th century, you may say, okay, the government is driving a lot of the innovation, but certainly in this time period, most of the innovation is coming from firms operating in the market. Now, those innovations may come from universities or from scientists, but it is the firms and individual entrepreneurs that are really taking that knowledge and translating it or bringing it to the consumer. Okay, so how do we want to think about the market economy? All right. Okay, so as I said, much of this innovation is taking place within the context of the market economy. The market economy is really going to have three aspects. Okay, we're going to need private property. All right, that's kind of our bottom layer. It's just private property, private ownership of goods. Okay, we layer on top of that markets, a way for people to exchange these goods. And then our final layer is going to be firms, places where these goods are produced, organizations that produce these goods. So you have these three layers, you basically will have a functioning market economy. Private property, places to exchange that, companies that produce the goods. These companies are usually privately owned. Okay, so let's go through these steps and see what institutions are needed. Property rights. You need privately held property, functioning legal system to enforce claims, equal protection in the courts. So the rich and powerful cannot expropriate from the less so. And so this is what you need. Of course, this is all the ideal. All right. So in practice, none of this is going to be perfect. Okay. You can think about countries as a spectrum. They're going to be on a spectrum as how well these things are enforced or guaranteed, or how well do they have equal protection, before the law. All right, so we're going to need the private property. Okay, so you need the institutions kind of around property rights. You're going to need markets. Okay, just to clarify, a way for people to exchange products and services, voluntary. All right, nobody's forcing anybody to participate in these markets. You're free to buy whatever you want. You're free to not buy whatever you want. You're free to sell whatever you want. You're free to not sell. All right, now inherent in this free entry and exit, there should be competition. Okay, the ideal is that there is competition. Okay, in a market system, competition is good because it drives innovation, it drives quality up, it drives price down in the long run in functioning markets. And you generally see this, TVs, smartphones, beverages, generally the quality and price of these goods has gone. So the quality's gone up, the price has gone down over time where the markets are functioning. Okay, institutions needed. We need open access to the market. If I'm an incumbent seller, I can't use nefarious means or capture government to keep my competition out. Again, this is the ideal. In practice, obviously, a lot of these things are not true from circumstance to circumstance. Okay, we need contracts to be honored. So again, like a functioning court system. Lastly, the firms, which is like largely ignored. But what is so special about firms? Okay, well, so they're basically going to take inputs, turn it into outputs. That's what a firm is. It's a black box that takes in inputs, spits out an output, okay? Then sells that output in the market, all right? And then we have, essentially markets in the inputs, markets in the output. Now, what is so special about them? Why they are different than families and governments or other ways of kind of organizing society is they can come on the scene very quickly. So it's or at least in the US, it's very easy to start a business. Okay. Started a business last week, then they can grow very quickly and they can go away very quickly. So these other things, essentially they can come into existence and come out of existence very quickly. So they can basically be organized and then dispersed rapidly, which is rare for organizations. Most organizations kind of stick around forever, or it's really hard to start a new one. You even think about universities. It's really hard to start a new high quality university for a number of reasons, but it's easy to start a high quality company. I mean, not easy, but like theoretically, anybody could start a high quality company doing whatever, but it would be very hard to start a new university. So these firms have this unique characteristic that's often not quite paid attention to. So what institutions do you need? Do you need for firms? We kind of need a legal system that allows this, sort of creation and dissolution. You need private property in the input and output markets. You usually need access to capital, although this one is not as important. So you need some sort of banking system, access to capital. As we go further in the past, you can see firms existing without really a functioning banking system. I mean, the U.S. banking system throughout the 1800s is, a bit wild. But even in the present, a lot of times VCs, or not VCs, but entrepreneurs, they oftentimes will raise kind of funds from family and friends first, before they go to the formal banking system. Although not always, but you can get a business loan. Lastly, for these firms to really function, you need rewards and risks. So if the firm is efficient, if they innovate, they should be rewarded. If they are inefficient, or they're like messing with consumers, or they're behaving badly, they should be able to go out of business. Okay. Many of the problems that we see, or many of the issues that we see, say in our financial sector, is the risks. Firms are not exposed to risk. Essentially, they're bailed out by other government, by the Fed, or other, or by the government directly. So some of the problems we have in our financial sector is there's no risk, really. That the risk part of it, yeah, the rewards, they do well, everyone gets paid, all the bankers get their bonus. They mess up, government bails them out. So this is, in the context of the US here, where we see this ideal not being realized in that particular sector. Again, these are all the ideal. This whole lecture is the ideal. All right. In practice, things are oftentimes very different, and the readings will deal with some of that, and I'll deal with some of that later. Other important institutions you need: institutions usually to promote human capital. This is typically a formal institution, although it can be informal as well. You can have a culture that respects education, learning, scholarly behavior, but you need something to promote human capital usually. All right. So if you think about the context of the US is blessed to have high levels of literacy initially, and there is a strong kind of cultural reverence for education in the North. We'll see how that plays out in later lectures. And you need some sort of property rights for non-tangible property, for intellectual property as well, usually to get innovation. So if we bring all this together, if you have all these institutions that we kind of went through, these key institutions, again, necessary but not sufficient, these institutions will lay the groundwork for a market economy where firms can innovate, where firms can essentially innovate themselves or take knowledge elsewhere and bring it to consumers. And this is how you get the process of sustained innovation that has characterized much of the world since the Industrial Revolution. Not all the world, but at many places, this is what is driving the sustained innovation that we see that is raising the living standards. All right. So if we're talking about economic growth, we're coming back to this institutional foundation for the market economy that drives that growth. Okay. So just to, again, make it a little more tangible. Okay. Imagine you're an entrepreneur. What are kind of the institutions you need just to start a business? You need your own human capital. So you need the idea, the knowledge, which can come from schooling, or it come from working in an industry. I see something that needs to be done here. You have to have property rights. You have to know that, hey, what I come up with, if I innovate and start this firm, someone can't just run along, steal my idea, and put me out of business. Otherwise, what's the point? You need to raise money. Again, functioning capital markets is nice, going to banks and asking for money or getting a business loan, or essentially that contract enforcement, so you can borrow money from friends and family. Hire workers, so it's helpful here to have a skilled population, skilled workforce to pull upon for these new enterprises. And then finally, I'm going to need to be able to get to the market. This oftentimes is the hardest step. Getting that foothold in the market. As I said, in many markets in the present, there's unfortunately a lot of regulatory capture. There are a lot of hidden ways that incumbent firms are able to keep their competitors at bay. And in the U.S. has increasingly become a very much a a licensed, a credentialed society, and so even in like employment, it's often hard to get into certain markets without the right credentials. And in so this market access oftentimes in the present is kind of the difficult part. But okay, if you have all these institutions in place, this is what you will need to promote or to at least have the necessary conditions for innovation, which is the driver of growth. Let's take a break.